Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to another edition of Physician Wealth Med Podcast. We're so glad that you're joining us today. If you're listening to the podcast, you can find them wherever podcasts are located. The video versions of our podcast are listed on our website. So we have both versions. We are so happy to have Trevor Oldham here today from Podcasting U. And we want to give you some wealth medicine as it regards to maybe setting up your podcast as a doctor, because we know that you have something to say, and this is a way that you can say it. So Trevor, thank you so much for joining me here today, and give us, our doctors, our listeners, a little bit about you and your company, because this podcast goes out to about 4,000 doctors.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Kevin, for having me on today. Super excited to chat with you. And just to give you some context, a little bit about myself and my company. I actually started the company back in 2017, but even prior to that, it was back in 2015. I was running a separate company at the time, and I thought it would just be cool to go out there and to start my own podcast. So I was actually still in college at the time, and I would record interviews either out of my dorm room or right outside my dorm room. At the end of the hall, there was basically like an enclosed study room where basically only one spot, so no one else could come in, and there was just one desk, so I'd either record in those two spots. So I did that for about 2 years or so and really enjoyed the podcasting aspect of it, of interviewing. It could have been entrepreneurs, it could have been real estate investors, just anyone that was interesting, had an interesting background, really anyone that was successful. So that ended up leading me into the world of freelancing. So I had all these skills I had self-taught myself for 2 years, and then I ended up just breaking off that partnership with the partner and ended up freelancing. And I was finding gigs of people that wanted to get booked on podcasts, people that needed guests for their podcast. So I did that for about a year or so and realized like there's a marketplace for this. People actually need help getting on podcasts. People need help starting their own podcasts and getting guests for their podcasts. So after about the first year of freelancing, that's where I ended up building the brand Podcasting U. Started bringing on some team members, and I've really grown it over the last 8 years or so. And really our specialty is just helping people either get on podcasts, start their podcast, basically anything when it comes to podcasting. We've probably done it at this point. So it's been a unique industry, especially seeing the growth over the last, I'd say 5 years or so, and happy to touch on it. But yeah, it's a little bit, I mean, I could always go more in depth on it, but wanted to give you a high level overview of what it looked like starting the company and sort of where we are today.
That's fantastic. I know I have to personally say that I do use your company, and I'm very pleased and very impressed. The way I came across your company is I received a notification from someone that was being promoted from your company and wanted to know if he could be on my podcast, which is kind of interesting. So that's how I found out about you. But I have been pleased every step of the way with what you do, putting things together, matchmaking, if you will, in the podcast world. They really take the time to understand what you're trying to do as far as with your podcast, or if you're trying to invite guests and things like that, and getting those guests on your podcast. And it's been very successful for me. And I thought you might want to hear, as a doctor, some of this information too as well. Talk about the different styles. Like if there was a doctor that wanted to do a podcast, talk about the different styles of podcasts that maybe if they were going to start something like this, maybe adopting a style.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like there's a few different ways that you could go about it. So one, you could do a solo podcast. So as in the name, you go out there and you just do the episodes on your own. Or you have a podcast like yours, Kevin, where right now we're talking to each other, where you bring on guests onto your show. And then from there it can really be, are you just sharing your expertise on episodes? Are you sharing industry news and talking about it, what's going on? I think there's really any different avenue that you can go on. I enjoy both aspects of it, honestly. I've done both, where I've gone through and I have guests on the show. Obviously, that's a little bit more work because you have to go out, you have to source the guests, you have to make sure you know who you're talking to, what you're going to be talking about on the show. And then on the flip side, when I'm recording episodes on my own, it's nice because I can put together the full content of the episodes. But sometimes it is nice to chat with someone instead of me just sitting there talking into the mic for 30 or 40 minutes. But you can really bring in any direction that you want to go in, especially if you're a doctor. Do you just want to, let's say, do you want to just talk to other doctors in your area of practice, or do you want to talk to anyone that has an interest in what you're doing? Or I've seen shows where they bring on doctors who are investing in real estate, and that's only the people they talk to. So whether it's in your area of expertise or it's more along the lines of owning or running your business, I've seen podcasts for doctors where they're talking about how to grow your practice and what you're doing. So I mean, I feel like there's so many different avenues that you could take your podcast with.
And it's endless, isn't it? You can carve that up any way that you want in the subject matter. I think one of the things that maybe people get scared about when they think about podcasting is, the amount of topics. Oh, I'm going to run out of information. But it doesn't take that long to get creative and to find new ways and spur on new ideas and new topics to do that. Talk to us about that. If someone has like a mental block, it's like, oh man, I think I just ran through all of my thoughts. Would I have a short-lived life span for a podcast, or could I keep it going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, what I like to do is I like to go through and I like to jot down what do I want to talk about on my podcast. And so that'll start to give you some ideas, whatever area that you may be wanting to take it in. And then from there, honestly, it's a great tool and I highly recommend using it. And what I use for myself is I just use ChatGPT and I'll just plug in and I'll basically say, here's my podcast. Here are the topics that I want to talk about. Can you put together episode titles? And then based on those episode titles, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. Maybe I do want to talk about this. And then over time, I'll have 10 episodes I've talked about. And then I can really, as I'm producing the show, you can take those topics that you've talked about and you can go through and you can see your stats. Okay, here's how many people listen to this episode. So I can see, okay, 10 people listen to this episode, 50 people listen to this episode. Okay, obviously people are gravitating more towards the episodes that have, the 50 downloads versus the 10 downloads. So then I take that title of the 50 downloads and I put it again back into ChatGPT. And I just say, hey, can you create similar topics that are similar to this, but not exactly this topic? And then I really start to build it out from there. And honestly, that's been the biggest thing for me in having my own show, is doing it that way. It's going on. And I've done it in the past, but it's going on, checking out other people's podcasts, seeing what they're talking about. I can go on Amazon, look on bestsellers, new books that are coming out, and then even something as simple as using Google Alerts. So you can set it up, and I can set it up, say, if I'm talking about real estate investing, I can set up a Google Alert for real estate investing, and every day it'll send me the top articles in real estate. So I can go on and I can see, okay, is there anything interesting from these articles that is worth talking about on my podcast? So there's a couple of different avenues that you can get it, but I definitely found before ChatGPT, honestly, and using that tool, it could definitely be a challenge thinking, okay, like what do I want to talk about on my podcast? And I find that just using that tool can definitely help alleviate just to give you some ideas and to help you brainstorm, because I found that was one of the harder parts, because especially when you're starting a podcast, you don't want to just do 5 or 10 episodes and then be done with it. You want to make sure that, over time, whether you have an episode once a month or once a week or once every 2 months, however, the cadence may be, it can be tricky. Definitely can be tricky to find episodes. That's why I try to use these tools at my disposal or look at other podcasts just to give myself some ideas. And conversely, same thing. If I'm interviewing guests on my podcast, I'll look at the guests that have been on other people's podcasts and see if there's anyone that I could bring that they've had onto my show. And again, not that I want to do it with every single guest, but if they've already produced the show, they've already found the guest, it's going to make my life a little bit easier instead of me going on Google and searching and everything that would come into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really appreciate your comments on the Chat GPT too, for using AI. I don't know if that's what you use, Chat GPT, but AI can really help you source things that way. I find I use AI a lot for titles, trying to find a catchy title. I'm a wealth advisor that has a podcast for doctors. Give me a riveting title about this subject matter, and then he'll give me a whole list of them. And then I might just use a combination of whatever I see, but at least it throws out and gets the information. It gets the creative juices going for sure. Yeah. So for a doctor that is considering using some of their skills, what are some, I was thinking like your specialty that you have as a doctor, obviously you've got enough to say in your specialty, and I'm sure that could go on and on and on because people need to know what you know. And especially if you want to give back, you could even do something, maybe life as a doctor. Here's what it looks like if you're looking at like mentorships or something like that, like what to expect, or something that would say, I'm a doctor, but I really had to learn the business side of things because I own my medical practice, and maybe the bumps in the road that helped you get where you're at, but I find a lot of times people don't want to retire from something. They want to retire to something, or they want to have something that interests them outside of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Or maybe it was just something that you would just like to grow your practice and have a podcast to engage people so that when they come see, or if they see some of your material online, you can use that as a great marketing strategy too. What are your thoughts on some of those things?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with it. And I find that one, it gives you credibility. And obviously anyone can go out and start a podcast, but I find someone started a podcast, so putting in the effort, obviously they're knowledgeable and they have something to talk about. And not every podcast is going to be like that, but let's say for doctors and entrepreneurs, business owners, hopefully going to be knowledgeable in that podcast. So you can put it up there on your website. So if you have, let's say, someone that's interested in becoming a patient of yours, they can go through and they can check out your podcast, be like, okay, this, man or woman, they really know what they're talking about, and they can build credibility that way, more so than you just have that about, you have your bio on your website or it goes over your credentials, and that's nice and everything, but it is nice if someone can hear directly from you. Yeah. What I really like about the podcast aspect of it is you could take like a 30-minute episode and you could create anywhere from 5 to 8 social media clips of say 30 seconds on average. And that's really nice because I find, like, even myself, it's sometimes hard to think, like, what do I want to create? What type of videos do I want to put out there on social media to grow my company? And if I could do an interview with someone such as yourself, Kevin, when we're talking today, and I take the interview and I create a bunch of clips, it's just so much easier for me instead of just sitting in front of the camera and recording video after video where there's not that much engagement going on. So I really like that aspect of it. It just makes it so much easier to create videos. And, like, as an example, a tool that I use it's called Capwing. So it's Kapwing. And what it does is you take your full interview, say it's 30 minutes, and there's a button on there where you click repurpose. So you upload your video, you click repurpose, and it takes like 20, 30 minutes or so, but you can dictate how long you want the clips to be, whether they're 15 to 30 seconds, 30 to 45, 45 to 60, and 60 seconds and up. And then it'll generate anywhere from 10 to 12 videos for you. And not that I want to use all of them, but there are most of the time a handful of them that I can use. So it just saves me time using that tool. And it's relatively inexpensive. I think I pay $24 a month for it. So that's just an example that I could take that, and then I can schedule it out there on my social media and just, again, build more credibility and get more exposure that way.
I think the credibility piece is huge too, because especially for people that have the famous bio on their websites, which we all do, right? It's got to be there. If it's not there, we got a problem. But if it is there, you may still have a problem because it's just print. And a lot of times when someone can hear your voice, or they can see your face and see the interaction and the personality and your temperament of who you are, that'll raise credibility super fast, and just give you another edge. And if you're not doing these things, maybe you could implement that into your practice as a way to say, okay, we need to have someone become in charge of this so that you can get that aspect of your practice growing. It'll make your practice way more valuable too in the long run too. And maybe you'll see it even sooner than you think in the short run. We always talk about the long run, but what about the short run? Make these little incremental changes. One thing that I find too, Trevor, is that the quality of guests that come on the show just blows my mind. That they are who they are, and they're coming on my show. So I think if you're considering doing a podcast, the guest, if you do adopt that model, you'll be surprised at who comes on your show, and it'll start to take a life of its own a little bit from that.
So that was one of the best things I ever did when I was starting my show. So I can take you back 2015, starting the show and being in college, and I'm interviewing these people that are, for the most part, 7-figure, earners, and just being able to spend 30 minutes to 60 minutes with them, where if I reached out to them, I said, hey, so-and-so, can I pick your brain? Most likely they would say, probably not. But being able to reach out to them and be like, hey, can I interview you for 30 minutes? I just got to learn so much from them, and I can literally ask them the exact questions that I want. So if they're a social media expert, okay, how did you grow your Instagram following? What exact strategies did you use? How many posts do you create per day? What does your team look like? Just, I can ask you pretty much anything I want, within reason to a certain degree, but I really liked that aspect of it. And I just was able to learn so much from it. And then I would say just from being a podcast host and just having to talk to people, on a very consistent basis, I just overall became a better public speaker because of that, speaking in front of other people, speaking on sales calls. If you're a doctor speaking to your patients, I found that I just became better over time because I was just talking more. I was just figuring it out per se. So like when I was in college, I didn't really, there's no really courses you could take to become a better speaker. I can usually end up taking a public speaking course at the end of it that they just happen to offer. But I find I think that's one of the number one fears people have is public speaking. And just by going on these podcasts, it just helped me overcome that fear and then just become a better speaker in pretty much all areas of my life. And you can't really see that going into a podcast. You don't expect it to be. But if you're someone like myself that it was a little bit trickier, having that podcast really pushed me outside of my comfort zone and then allowed me to excel in that area. So that's why I think it's great having guests where you get to learn from them and you get to have conversations and you just become a better speaker overall.
That's excellent. So let's say a doctor would like, excuse my voice, by the way, I just got following up on the end of a cold here, but let's say a doctor says, okay, that sounds great. I would like to do this. What do you think the next steps for that particular doctor would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first you want to figure out, okay, like what do you want the podcast to be? So what type of topics would you prefer to talk about? So you want to figure out, okay, like, do you want to bring on people in your industry? Do you want to just have it on your own? Do you want to bring in guests? So you sort of want to figure out like, what do you want to do with this podcast? Or what's sort of the end goal of the podcast? Is it to bring in new clients? Is it just to build brand awareness and just folks to come to your website and to check you out? So that's sort of where you'd want to start. So what I would do is once you have that idea, like what do you want to go down? So if you want to have guests on your show, I would just start building out a list of potential guests that you'd like to have on, or start doing some research. Conversely, if you're doing a solo show, start building out episodes or topics that you would like to talk about on your show. And what I recommend is when anyone is going out there and starting their podcast, that you record about 5 episodes before your podcast goes live. And then that way you can already schedule the podcast about 5 weeks out, just in case something comes up and you can't record for a month or two or whatnot. So I always like to have that nice backfill of episodes when you're starting off. And I would say along with that, you just have to figure out some of the logistics when it comes to, okay, who's going to be editing the show? Is it going to be myself? Am I going to hire someone out to edit it? How often do I want to do the episodes? Is it going to be weekly? Is it going to be bi-weekly, monthly? Some folks do daily. I think that's a bit much. I think that's a lot of talking to do a daily show, but there are daily shows out there. And then I would say just go in with the mindset that it's a long game. Podcasting is not something such as like running Facebook ads or Google ads where you put in your money, you put in $1,000, you can see the next day or two whether you got a return on your investment. Podcasts can really take 6 months, 12 months, even longer to really grow your audience. So you just have to know that you're going to be in it for the long haul. And that's why when it comes to podcasting, you just have to make sure that you enjoy it because it is a long-term process. It's not necessarily something that you're going to see results from right away.
Yeah, good point. My first podcast was February 2023. And, when I launched it, the good point about the 5 episodes too, that's extremely important to get yourself a bank of shows already to roll. That's a critical thing. I think that's very smart. I remember saying to myself, why didn't I do this 5 years ago? I mean, I had it in my brain that I wanted to do this coming around 2019, 2020. Of course, COVID came in, but it's like, that's when I was first having those thoughts of doing it. And when I started to do it, I said, man, I should have done this a long time ago. The neat thing about it too, is that where you said it kind of makes you a better speaker and how you're writing down your topics of things to talk about. you'll find that you'll start seeing things happen in your daily practice and in your life, your experiences, that you'll say, man, this would be great material for another podcast. You ever find yourself doing that?
Oh yeah, yeah, most certainly. It's funny how many times I've just taken out my phone and I'll go in the notes section on the phone and just type something up and be like, oh, that's a great idea for a podcast. And you don't really think about that until you have your own show. Then all these ideas start popping into your head.
Yeah, it's the same thing, almost like you bought a new Lincoln and now you see all the same Lincolns around, that kind of thing. But you'll find things in your daily life to say, that's shareable. That's something that I could share on my podcast. It'd be great. We could dive into it. We could give a few points on that. And I think when you do that, you'll find life in your podcast. I think the other thing from my experience, and maybe you could tell us about your experience too, is don't sweat it if you miss a deadline on your podcast. Like if you were thinking, man, I want to get 2 episodes a month, and then you start to get flustered because maybe it's not happening as smooth as that, just keep going. And what would you say to that?
Oh yeah, I can't agree more with that. Things inevitably are going to come up, whether it's in business, whether it's in life, that certain fires you have to put out, maybe someone's sick in the family that you have to take care of. Who knows what's going on in your life. Sometimes it's just you happen to miss one, but just know that it's okay and just come back. Whether, let's say you're doing a weekly show and you go a week or 2 without it, just try to get back into it. And again, don't put so much pressure on yourself, because I find if you put so much pressure on yourself, then it's like, I don't necessarily want to do this anymore, because you don't want to. It shouldn't be like a stressful thing in your life. It should be something that's enjoyable. I don't want you to be stressed out thinking, oh, okay, I have to record an episode today. It's be like, I'm enjoying recording this episode today. So I agree with that. It's just, if you happen to miss a week or 2, don't sweat it. Just get back into it when you have the time.
Yeah. Do you have any stories of maybe some people that you've come across in the past that went through a few struggles and maybe how they ironed those out?
So I would say, like, different clients that we worked with, I would say just, honestly, really the biggest thing I found is that people start the show and they're 3 or 4 months in and they're like, how come I'm not getting any clients that have started the show? Or how come my listenership is still, relatively small? And again, it just goes back that it just takes a long time to build. I don't want to say like a long time. Like, I don't want you to think you're going to have to be there 5 years to build this podcast audience, but just knowing that it's a long-term game where, again, it could take 6 months to 12 months to really start to see some results. And even in my own podcast, and I kick myself for it. Now, back in 2015, when I had started it, we were getting early on about 100 listeners an episode. And once we hit like the 6-month mark, it went to like 200. Then once we hit the year, it was like 500. And then like a year and a half in, we had like 2,000 listeners coming to the show. And, for me, that's a pretty decent sized show. And again, I kick myself forever. I don't know why I ever stopped doing it. I don't know what I was thinking back then, but nonetheless, it can be this slow growth. And then all of a sudden it starts to pop off at the end when you're getting to year 2 and year 3, because now you've built up this audience. So people are starting to find out more about you. People are starting to recommend you to their friends and family, which is obviously a great recommendation. Like, I know for me, if I listen to a podcast that I enjoy, I'm most likely going to tell my dad and my brother, who also listen to podcasts. And the next thing you know, they tell their friends about checking out a podcast. And it's a good growth strategy, but sometimes it can just take a little while to find those people. So that's where I find people struggle early on, is just expecting immediate results right away. And then I would say if there was another aspect, it would just be the editing of the show, where they record an episode, but maybe the quality of the content's not great, where they don't have a professional microphone or it sounds choppy. So you just want to make sure that you have a good editor, you have a good quality microphone. And whether you hire someone like myself or you find a freelancer or another company, you just want to, or you do it yourself even, you just want to make sure that you have a nice edited show that people are going to be listening to, because I don't want to listen to a podcast and the sound quality is terrible. I can't hear the guest, or one guest is talking louder than the other. We've all listened to podcasts from time to time where that's what it sounds like, and no one really wants to listen to that type of show. So those are just some mistakes that people can make. And if you say, hey, I want to be a guest on people's shows, same thing. Just make sure you're in a nice, quiet room. Make sure you have a good quality podcast microphone. And I say this because over the years, there's been a few folks where I interviewed one, you could hear someone mowing their lawn in the background, like quite loud. I've even been interviewing someone where they've been recording on their iPhone. It must have been up on their dash, and they were going through a drive-through, and they were placing their drive-through order while I was trying to talk to them. So that's so when that happens, I really can't use that episode. Nor do I want you to come back onto my show if that's how you're going to treat it. But again, 99.9% of people they know what's going on. But you do run into those few folks. So if you are thinking about, hey, I want to be a guest, just make sure you're in a nice quiet spot. Make sure you have a microphone and just set that time aside for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing that I found too is the friendships that you make. Our model is interviewing doctors for doctors and industry professionals and things like that. But mostly it's doctors interviewing doctors for doctors, and the friendships that we've made. They'll take your call. We'll do some things. We got a virtual conference that we're working on right now with some of our podcast guests. Which I thought was really neat that we're pulling together. We're spearheading that for January of 26. But it's just a great thing that you meet these lifelong friends, I guess is what I would call it. So in this part of the show, would you tell us exactly like what your company does and how you could either find podcast guests or you can put them on other people's podcasts? Talk about that.
So really what our company does when we're working with a client is the client will come to us and we want to figure out, okay, who's your target audience? Who are you looking to speak to? So if you're going out there and being a guest on a show, we'll basically take that information and then we'll build a list of potential podcasts that we feel as though the client would be a great fit for. So if you want to go speak specifically to doctors or business owners, whoever it may be, we'll basically build out a list for the client. We get the client's stamp of approval. And then from there, we just start reaching out to these shows and we start securing your interviews for you. And because we've been doing this for going on 8 years now, we have a lot of warm relationships in the space. So it's not as much of a cold email per se. It's more like, hey, you've had this previous client of ours on your show. Here's another client we have who I think would be a great fit. Here's why. And we already have that recognition built with them. So it is nice in that aspect. So that's probably, I would say, our bread and butter service is booking guests or booking our clients on other people's podcasts. And then we also do a little bit here and there. We do booking guests for podcast hosts. So if you're a podcast host and you need some guests, we can, that's a service that we provide. We can also take your interviews and create social media clips out of them. I probably gave away the secret sauce a little earlier in today's episode. So if you don't want to do that, you can always hire a company, but that's a great tool to use. And then I would say helping people to edit their podcast as well, because I know that can definitely be a pain point where sometimes folks just want to sit down, record, and then, send it off to myself or someone else and
ship it off.
Yep, exactly. And edit it for you.
And I think that's huge too for doctors too. If you're thinking about doing this, you can just record your episode and just farm it right out. Then you're done, and then they can take it from there. So that's always a great service to do. I know for me, there was a dentist that I was looking to get on my show. I could call and I could go through the channels, which I've done. I do a lot too, but it was just nice to pass it off to Haley at your company, and she was able to get that lined up for me. So I mean, it could work even that way, which was awesome. So I appreciated that. Any other thing you'd like to talk about there? Are we missing any content maybe for the doctors who might want to do something like this?
I would say really the last biggest piece of advice I would be is just knowing that it can be uncomfortable in the beginning. If you've never been behind a microphone, if you've never interviewed someone, and just know that it really honestly takes 5 to 10 episodes for you to get your feet down, to figure out what you're going to talk about. I can tell you when I was doing my first couple episodes, frankly, they were pretty terrible. I wouldn't recommend listening to them, but then over time you get a little bit better at it. But just know that it's normal because you've never done it before. It can be uncomfortable, but again, once you get 5 to 10 episodes in, you start to get the hang of it. You start to become more comfortable, and then that's really where the fun starts, where you're not as anxious about the show because okay, I know to hit the record button, because I know for me, like early on, that was a mistake I made, was interviewing a guest and I forgot to hit the record button, one of my first few episodes. So you learn like, okay, like I'm going to put some practices, and I now I have a sticky note on my computer every time I have an interview, make sure I hit the record button, and just things like that you just make mistakes early on. But again, once you get 5 or 10 episodes in, you start to get the hang of it. And that's really where the enjoyment of being a podcast host comes out.
So you mean to tell me that they don't have to have a perfect episode every time? They don't have to wait for the holy grail of podcasts coming out of their microphone. I think that's another thing, to be real, be authentic. And if you're a doctor with any years of experience, doesn't matter if you're new or seasoned, you've got something to say. I believe you've got something to say. You'll find things that in your everyday life that other people, maybe even other doctors, want to hear. So as you craft your message, get it out there. It will help you as a doctor. It will help you in your practice as far as marketing goes too, and growing your practice. And it gets you into, I believe, the 21st century of marketing, right? It just helps you out that way to keep you relevant because you have something to say, and it's super important there. Anything else you'd like to bring up on this?
I think that's perfect. I think we covered all the big points.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really want to thank you, Trevor, for doing this. Trevor is the CEO of Podcasting You. You can find him at podcastyou.com. So this has been your podcast wealth medicine for you today. So the beautiful thing about podcasts, as you know, as a doctor, you can listen to them or view them at your own time. We know you're busy. Same thing with other professionals too. You can put this in your car, you can watch it or listen to it at any time. And I think you would enjoy the fruits of your labor by doing this. So I want to thank you, Trevor, again for doing this today. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time and your company for all you do for me and my podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors.